Fathering Shadows. I think before I talk about the book, I need to reply to Moses' challenge. Yeah, I'm blessed with friends, and we debate things like some of the serious issues. And I think Moses is right. It was a good conversation that we had driving to Joburg, to Pretoria, and about me having to publish that book based on that conversation. I'm not sure about that as yet. The reason for that, what I've noticed about myself is that I don't know, maybe it will sound okay for me to say I'm driven by fear sometimes to do things. Some of the things that I do is because I'm driven by fear. Can I please have the second slide? These are the 4 books that I've written. The first 2 on loss, when you've lost a loved one. Then we have these other 2 on relationships, Lovers and Mirrors and Love Rage. One thing that makes me write and publish a book is that the topic has to sit heavily in my heart. That's one thing. The second thing, I make sure that I need to commit myself fully without paying attention to any other thing. And it has to resonate with whatever that I'm going through at that time, or that people next to me are going through. So I strongly believe that Mosey, we will work on that book. In fact, we've been talking about it for quite a while. We will work on that book, but right now there are 2 books that are in my head. They are completely finished. I just need to sit down and write them, So definitely, I see that book as a 3rd book. There are 2 books that I still need to publish. Then that will be the 3rd one, So definitely, we will work on that. Looking at these books, and this one as well, I'm reminded of R.C. Sproul. R.C. Sproul is a theologian, and he's late. I think he died last year or 2 years back. He once shared a story that resonated with me at that point in time. R.C. Sproul spoke about a comedian who was busy sharing jokes on stage. His story goes to say that the comedian was so good that every time he was telling his story, people were rolling on the floor. They were loving his presentation. He was one of those best comedians. It so happened that during his presentation, as he was sharing his story, the building at the back caught fire. And he decided that he should obviously warn people that were in the building that the building has caught fire. And then he shouted to the people that he was making jokes to that the building has caught fire. And the more he shouted, the more people laughed, because they were convinced that he was still making a joke. So the more he shouted that the building is on fire, it was the more they laughed, up until there was no escape. As a result, they all died. Why am I sharing that story? And I like how R.C. Sproul brought this in conclusion. The thing with artists is that sometimes when we share about our pain or some of the experiences that we've gone through, audience has a tendency of thinking that we are sharing our own stories. We are not sharing our own stories. We could be sharing our own stories, but one of the main things we are doing that is to evoke the emotion and get you to cross over to the side where you'll find your healing. So sometimes you can travel long distances to listen to people sharing their sad stories, only to find that they are sharing those stories because they want to evoke something in you. And the saddest thing that can happen to anyone is to come to such meetings and then you forget about your own experiences. Because after all is said and done, we all need to heal. And in order for us to do that, we need to have that introspection. May I please have a second slide? Thank you. That another one? Yes. This is where I'm going to dwell today. This covers everything about the book, and I'm going to unpack it shortly. There's this thing that I really know about, that there are some people who are born blind in one eye. And it's one thing to realize that you are blind in one eye. In fact, there's a true story that somebody shared to me about a guy who was born blind in one eye, and he was not aware of it up until he had to go for his driver's license. And when he went for his driver's license, as he was doing those tests, he realized that he was blind in one eye. And he was surprised by that because all his life he thought everything was fine. And that's what comes to my mind when I think about the issue of fatherhood and absent fathers. There are two categories in this thing. It's either you are aware of your brokenness and these heads that you are carrying, or you think you are fine. And another thing that tends to happen when you talk about absent fathers or fatherhood, and people tend to think it's some of us who grew up without fathers, who lost our fathers when we were very young, when we were 3. I wouldn't have written a story, I wouldn't have written this book if it was all about that. Fathering shadows, the fathers who are present, who are under the same roof with you, but they are never there, Whenever you are reaching out to them, they are never there to be found. This book is not about those who grew up with that. It's about also. Because what happened in my life is that I realized that because I didn't have a father, that was fine. I knew that this was clear. I understood where I was. But when I looked across to see some of my friends who had fathers, how their lives were, I realized that they were also battling. Because fathers do not open themselves up. So I was in that category of people who understood themselves. I realized that I didn't have a father and I was battling with that. I was okay. I knew that was never a problem. But some are living in denial, where you think everything is fine, but everything is not fine. So you find people who are like that lady, who are blind in one eye, but they are not aware. And the reason that thing is a challenge is, next to that lady, we find this photo of an old man walking his daughter down the aisle. Obviously, it's a wedding. And as I thought about it, it hurt me so much that the biggest challenge that a lot of women are facing is that, especially those who walk down the aisle, is that they walk down the aisle with men they never understood, the men they never knew. They walk down the aisle with strangers. Normally, what we understand about that picture is that a father is walking his daughter down the aisle to give her to this other man, proclaiming that I've been a good father to this daughter, and I'm asking you to take care of my daughter. I've opened up to my daughter. She knows everything about me. And I'm opening up. I'm giving this daughter to you. I'm opening up to you. But what tends to happen is that these ladies walk down the aisle with strangers, and they get into marriage trying to understand their husbands. And the saddest thing that happened is when your mother protected your father from you, or you were protected from your father, meaning you don't know your father. She portrayed your father as this good guy. He was a gentleman. So when I realized that I was battling with the issue of fatherhood, and at that time, because I had already started working on this book, I had to find a strategy, because I realized that my mom had never said things that, are not well with my father. So I started digging, I remember, I think I told Noah about this. It was strange. Yeah, I told Noah. It was strange because I had to go back when they were dating. I just needed to understand things, what was happening. And one of those things that contributed to that, I needed to understand myself. There were things that I was battling with in my face, as a guy. I was battling, and the more I battled, the more I realized that, no, I need to understand who my father was. Obviously, he's late, but I needed to understand who this guy was. And as I started listening to my old lady telling me about this man, my father, I just couldn't believe it, There were some of the things that were like really, really shocking, Obviously, I didn't write about them, but there was, and right there, I realized that some of our mothers, they're doing a good job in hiding our fathers from us, and not tell us some of the things that we need to know about our fathers. And this is why some of our marriages are suffering, because you are busy expecting so much from this guy. You're expecting him to be too perfect, and you've never taken time to understand who your father. And the saddest thing is when you compare this guy to your father, who is an imaginary being, because you've never sat down with him. So when I wrote this book, I needed to unpack that because I understand that fellowship is key. It's when I talk to you, I tell you about everything that I go through. The chapters that I've written in this book, they cover all those things, who I am as a person. And one of the things that made me write this book, it was, like I said, it was fear. I was so afraid of dying without having shared the things that I've shared in this book. Because when I was in the crossroad of lives, there were some of the things that I felt my father was going to be able to help me with these things. And then I thought, let me put them down so that whatever happens in my life, my kids can read this book and find, and maneuver through crossroads, of which it's a main thing. What tends to happen with our fathers is that they die without us having met them, And I kept on noticing this thing as well with most of my friends who were losing their fathers, obviously later on in life. There's this thing that tends to happen when your father has passed on. His friends, they will come to you and say, your father was very proud of you, And then you will wonder, because your father never spoke to you. The only time he spoke to you is because something was broken, and heaping instructions, trying to understand why this is that way, So you only get to realize for the first time that your father used to speak about you to his friends, but never to you, So when he comes home, he's a different person. But out there, he talks about you. I have a son that I'm proud of. I have a daughter that I'm proud of, But he never speaks to you. You don't know who he is. One of the challenges that I've seen with us, especially growing up, this thing of affirmation as well, We find that we long for affirmation. And there's chapter 3 there that in the book titled Uindoda. I wrote this chapter just to clarify to some of our fathers, because they're busy running away thinking we need their finances. We do, but it's not only that. There are many things that contribute to that. And fathers' roles are distorted to a point that if there are people that I know that they are confused with their identity, are men most of the times. I know this is a bold statement that I'm making, but it's fine. I'm repeating myself. I think men are confused, with their identity. I'm going to explain that shortly. So, the challenge that I wanted the fathers who are here to understand is that we need you more than your finances. Your finances, they play a major role, but we also need you to be present in our lives. Talk to us as human beings, we are figuring ourselves, that's me and our 2 sons on the far left. Yeah. The reason why I left that photo there is because I said so much about the ladies, your confusion, and it was a deliberate move again for me to put those 2 poets and make them and put 2 ladies sharing about fatherhood and absent fathers. Because another mistake that we make is to think that it's only the boys who need their fathers. We don't think about the daughters and needing their fathers. So, in this case, again, about the cry that is not verbalized of the likes of me and Mo and other guys, who grew up without fathers, and all of a sudden you find yourself having to be a father. And I'm glad that our wives are proud of us, or of the job that we are doing. But here's another thing that I'm saying it for the first time, because obviously it's a nature of of the book and the way I write. When you look at that, that is me holding these guys, and every time I play with them, as Nompilo was sharing, this is one thing that I know that most of the guys are going through. It's when you have to father. These guys, Ngo and Nompilo, they were talking about me fathering them. I think it's easy to father other people. The hardest thing is when in the process you are trying to father yourself. You are trying to be this father that you never had. That is one of the hardest things. If you look at that photo, that one, you can never see that right there is an infant Thulani longing to be loved because he was never loved in his childhood. He never had a man showing him love. So right there, you see these perfect fathers who are doing all they can, but you will never see when they drown, longing for that. And to the ladies here who are single parents, I think one thing that I realized early in my life was that as much as I grew up without a father, but there was something that God had provided me with, I will get these strangers affirming me, Because for me, all I ever needed was a man. And I'm clarifying this. I'm emphasizing this. I needed a man to say, Ngindota, I'm a man. And some of our ladies, they try hard. There's this thing that ladies will post on social media. You can never be a man and a woman at the same time. You are confusing yourself. There's something about a father figure or a male who's talking to another child and saying, I am proud of you, Even if you grew up without a father, if a random man can say that to you, it makes a very big difference, So to those ladies who think I'm doing a better job without a man in my life, I'm not saying it's wrong. You are trying all you can, I understand, but you're making a big mistake. I have a very loving mother. She affirmed me as I was growing up, but that was never enough. I needed a man, even if he was a stranger, to say, Thulani, I'm proud of you. You are a man. And that thing, before I move on from this point, it happened to me when I was 23 or 24 years old, For the first time ever, I had a man speak in my life. And again, I'm going to say this. A lot of people would think it's because I grew up without a father. There are a lot of you guys who grew up with fathers, but you've never had a conversation with a father. Just a few days ago, just a few days ago, I had a chat with this guy. His father is a pastor. And when I unpacked the book to him, I could see it in his face that he was hit hard. Because he realized that, Thulani, you are saying something that I've never noticed. And my father is a pastor, but I don't know my father. We've never had that relationship, And his father is busy fathering the church. He's available for all people out there, but he's not available at home. And when I write about this book, when I write Fathering Shadows, it's all about bringing these fathers from the shadows to the light, becoming visible and tangible in your families. We need that. It's a necessity. Fathers need to be present. And again, I don't want to be... This book, the way I wrote it in a way that it doesn't bash the fathers. Because we tend to do that with ease. When we talk about mothers, hey, our mothers are everything and our fathers are not. On Father's Day, we appreciate fathers and then the mothers are, It's just a book that is written to make fathers aware that they have a role to play more than being providers. There's this thing that I heard. It was a debate about two guys from Cape Town and Durban. This debate, these guys were trying to compete, So this guy, one of them is from Durban, the other one is from Cape Town. So they're competing, about these two cities. So this guy from Durban starts and he says, Durban is beautiful, we've got the beach, And this other guy from Cape Town is like, wow, yes, we've also got a beach in Cape Town, And then this other guy from Cape Town continues, we've got a Table Mountain, And this guy from Durban is like, we've got a beach in Durban, And he mentions the other guy from Cape Town again, he comes. In Cape Town, we've got Robben Island, The guy from Durban echoes again, we've got a beach in Durban, So that's the only thing he understood, that's the only thing he could pride himself with. That's the only thing. And when I said fathers are confused, this is what I meant. There was a time fathers could stand boldly in the crowd and say, I'm a provider, I'm a man. I think most of our fathers had that upper hand. They could stand and do that. Their identity was in that I could provide, I'm a man. There's a study that, as I was preparing for this book, there's a study that I came across. It was comparing two continents, Africa. I didn't want to mention these continents. Okay, it's Africa and America. The study goes to say that the challenge that most African fathers are battling with is that their relationship with kids, the only thing that they pride themselves with is providing. So that simply means when you're unemployed, you lose it completely. So the study goes to say that in America, what is happening, I'm not saying America is the best country or anything, I'm just stating this case that I came across. In America, fathers are more than providers. They are able to be there for their kids. They are able to fully commit themselves and outpour themselves. On the other hand, African fathers, it's all about, I am a provider. So when you are hit, when you're unemployed, all of a sudden you lose your value immediately. Your value drops because your value lies in one thing, you being a provider. So when these two men are debating about Cape Town and Durban, one of them was found saying, I'm a provider, I'm a provider. And any man who still believes that he can pride himself by standing in a crowd and say he's a provider, I think that statement on its own is confusing to ladies. Because if they were to ask, what is it that you can do that I cannot do in terms of providing? Because I work, maybe sometimes they earn higher than we do. So as men, we need to understand and have a mind shift that we cannot keep priding ourselves by thinking that because I'm a provider, I'm a provider. There needs to be other elements of fatherhood that we need to embrace. Be fully present in your children's life. Talk to them about life, Explain everything to them, Be present in your children's life. If there's one thing that this book is intending to do, it is only that. It's trying to get the fathers involved in our lives. If this book manages to do that, I keep saying that I'll have won, because that's all. You are more than a provider. There's a lot that you need to do. So, that is what Fathering Shadows is all about. I said I was 23 when, I've said this before in a book launch, I'm going to say it again. It was Dennis Solomon, I was going to go, I had just finished my degree, so I was going to be going to a workplace. I don't know whether he still remembers this, but he sat me down at the table. We sat with Dennis, started telling me about work, I'm going to mention some of the two things that have stood out for me, impacted the way I work. One of them was, Thulani, you're going to a workplace. Make sure that you are forever found doing something. That was it. If ever you run out of things to do, just go and stand before the wall and read those notices, those instructions and whatnot. There are these things that get pasted on the wall. Go and read them if you have nothing to do, but be always found doing something. And I embrace that. Up to this day, the way I work is because of that. And another thing that he told me was, Thulani, in the workplace, make sure that you don't join the cliques, And I got to the workplace, I realized that there are groups in the workplace, Before you know it, you're joining a wrong crowd. Why I'm sharing those things, they sound very simple, but these are the things that we are missing. We just need a man who's going to talk to us, I came to Cornerstone with the likes of Isaacs, and Roy, people who are able to look at you and just see that brokenness, and when they talk to you, I don't know whether they realize it or not, but because when you grew up without a father, when somebody calls you a son, something happens, And some ladies or some people, they end up finding those things in wrong places. You find that sometimes the only thing that we need from our fathers is them calling us sons and daughters. That's all. So the only reason why I wrote this book, similar to other books that I've written, I don't write to get hugs and comfort and solace. I write so that you'll be aware where you are in your life and then do your introspection. I strongly believe that we all need to do introspection. I've listened to songs written by guys who are in their 50s. And when you listen to these songs, like, this guy is 50 years old, is still crying for his father. Again, I'm repeating what I said. The hardest thing that you can ever do as a man is to have to father yourself. It's easy to father other people, but when you have to father yourselves, it becomes a challenge. So this is fathering shadows. Fathers are living in shadows. We don't see their colors. We need them to come out of the shades and be fully present in our lives. If fathers and children who grew up without fathers read this book and find that, definitely I'll find peace in my heart, knowing that I've managed to spark a dialogue in people's hearts. So thank you so much for coming. And now I believe we're going to have some questions and answers. I believe Nopilo will lead us. Thank you so much for everything. Thank you. You can follow me on Facebook as Thulani Yeyeye Gumede and YouTube as Thulani Yeyeye Gumede, and also on Twitter and Instagram as Yeyeye TG.